I am. Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so that when you're at the barbecue, when you're down tubing on some river somewhere in the Commonwealth or hiking in the woods and you run across somebody who's screaming climate change, you have good policy-driven, fact-driven, science-driven answers to that. I picked that particular saw because they've rebranded this more times than one soda manufacturer renamed their new Coke over and over again to try to get somebody to buy it. It is now, at least in the state level, the Transportation and Climate Initiative, carbon taxes and all. Steve Hayner is on with a senior fellow with the Thomas Jefferson Institute. Great piece on this, asking the very obvious question: how come Governor Northam isn't all out there just running around saying, look at us and TCI? How are you doing this morning, Stephen?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Why does it seem like more and more Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is the Al Gore of this generation, and everyone else wants to quietly talk about, doing climate change legislation, but they don't want to run around chasing the cameras with their own Green Deal proposals?
Well, they're happy to talk about climate change and the need to do all these wonderful things to prevent it. They just don't want to talk about the cost. They don't want to talk about how we eliminate carbon fuels from our economy and what that will do to your pocketbook. So that's why they're not talking about this initiative, this Transportation and Climate Initiative, because at its heart, it's a great big fat tax increase.
Well, and it's a wealth transfer as well, if I remember, because I think this is built off of the old carbon tax model and the Chicago Climate Exchange, which sounds like a 70s hair band, but the Chicago Climate Exchange would buy and sell your carbon credits. If you were green, you could sell them to companies that weren't, which seems odd because you would think you wouldn't want companies to be ungreen, but you give them the opportunity just to buy a hall pass like they're China or India.
Yes, this is it's very similar to that, except it's tightly focused on motor fuels, on gasoline and diesel. Mm-hmm. So you'll have to buy a credit. You won't have to. The company that sells you the fuel will have to buy a credit in order to have the permission to even sell you 1 gallon of gas or 1 gallon of diesel. They'll have to have paid a tax on it, a credit. And that cost, of course, will get passed on to you. And yes, they can trade those credits. They can do offsets to get more credits. They can hoard the credits and drive up the price. It becomes a very, very complicated marketplace. And it's not just a tax. You got to remember, there's two parts to this. Number one is the cost, the price of carbon they put on the gas pump. But then there's a rationing scheme. So whatever amount of gasoline Virginia uses in 2020, they want to force Virginia to use 3% less every year for the next 10 years so that it's 30% less by 2030, 2032, whatever the year turns out to be. They keep moving the target because they can't get it passed. Nobody's agreeing to do this. No state has actually done this yet. Every time they bring it up in the legislature, it gets shot down. It was shot down in Connecticut this year. It was shot down in Rhode Island just recently. And, after we started raising Cain about it last year, the governor just stopped talking about it. It disappeared. It's like they don't even want to admit that Virginia is a member of this compact, but Virginia still is.
Well, I remember the governor gleefully, I think he actually held a public signing event to sign into this compact. And Mark Herring was there and talking about how Virginia was going to come up with enforcement measures and how this was going to, function. And I guess, as with all of this, it's going to change the temperature of the oceans by 0.1% in 100 years.
Yeah. I mean, what they're talking about doing on the transportation fuels won't even be measurable.
So it obviously is there to make money for somebody. Is it the manufacturers of electric trucks? Is it Elon Musk improvement zone? Who is the one? We saw this with Solyndra and so many other of these government contractor types. Who are these people?
This is the electric vehicle industry. I mean, their goal clearly is to move everybody into an electric vehicle as fast as possible, preferably within a couple of years. Build the giant infrastructure you'll need to charge the cars, repair the cars. Of course, the electric companies will make a ton of money when everybody goes to an electric car. I mean, that's the vision. The vision is an all-electric economy. And, if you want a little runabout car to take you to Kroger, that's fine. It works great. If you want a great big truck to carry, 80,000 pounds of groceries to Kroger or to run a major economy with electric vehicles, that's not going to work. They're not being realistic at all.
And then that gets added to the price of the groceries. So again, this goes into this passive tax increase on the poorest of us because we have to buy groceries for our kids, and all that cost is going to be added to it.
Yep, that's exactly right. It flows through the entire economy, and again, gasoline prices, as you noted, are subject to a lot of fluctuation anyway. They always have been. They'll go up, they'll go down. Right now they're back up again because OPEC's production is down and because the United States is shutting down production under this administration. So we're not going to be the number one energy source anymore because for some reason this new administration doesn't want us to be the number one energy source anymore. So I mean, they know that with the gasoline sometimes it's kind of hard to spot how much of that is a tax, how much of that is going to the government. And again, part of my problem with this is they're not going to use the money that they raise. If this thing passes, they're not going to use the money they raise to really spend it on transportation. It's going to be spent on a bunch of other stuff. As you said, it's kind of an income transfer program. A lot of the low-income advocates are pushing for programs in their neighborhoods and bike paths and hiking trails and not something that's not going to help you get to work every day.
Well, and that's, the other factor of this is work is, we watch more and more centralization of work. And that leads to the workforce not just going to one locus. So mass transit suffers in that. So I see some of this going to subsidize mass transit, businesses, not businesses, government agencies that are seeing their buses at 1/10 capacity most times.
Right. There's a story in the Richmond paper today about which bus stops have shelters, and in order to get a shelter, as I read it correctly, you have to have like 50 riders a day. You would think these buses had 50 riders per hour, but a lot of them don't even have 50 riders per day. So that's telling you how much is being subsidized, and again, it's a market choice. I mean, people use mass transit because they have to. I understand that, and it's convenient in many cases. I understand that. But in many cases, people choose not to. And if they choose not to, you can't make them. And that's the whole point of this process. If you take away the man's car, if you take away his pickup truck, you're trying to force him to do it against his will, to use the mass transit.
And then go where you want them to.
Well, yeah.
Stephen Hayner is on with a senior fellow, state and local tax policy, specifically for the Thomas Jefferson Institute, jeffersonpolicyjournal.com. Great piece on this. And you write about the fact that in Connecticut, of course, the demagoguery immediately begins where it's the Republicans and the dark money and the oil concerns and the trucking companies and all of these backroom actors are out there derailing this wonderful sanctified legislation that will save the planet. So I guess we're going to be expecting the same kind of coverage as we fight this here in Virginia.
Well, again, one of the reasons we're talking about this right now is because this will have to be approved by the next General Assembly. Mm-hmm. I mean, Northam has put it off, but at some point he's got to put it to the General Assembly to join an interstate compact. This is what this is, an interstate compact. The legislature has to approve that. And he's admitted as much. He said he can't do it as governor. He needs a vote of the Assembly. So the 22 Assembly may vote on this, which means everybody right now should be asking all the men and women out there running for the General Assembly, what do you think about this? Are you going to vote for this? Are you going to vote against this? Do you think we need large carbon taxes? Do you think we need to ration gasoline to save the planet? Are you one of those folks who believes that? Or do you think, the market forces are working fine and we should not be taxing people? This failed in Connecticut This failed in Rhode Island for the simple reason that people understood how much money it was going to cost them on a daily basis. And the voters don't want higher taxes. They certainly don't want higher taxes unless they see a huge benefit from them. And if you look at the federal government, they're having a big conversation right now about infrastructure and highways and bridges and road,
Right.
And that's fine, and that's what Congress does. But the one thing nobody wants to talk about is raising the federal gas tax, even though it's been the same tax now for almost 30 years. They won't raise it because they know the voters don't like the idea. Even Joe Biden is not going to try to raise the gas tax. So, again, that's one reason I think they don't want to talk about it, and it's one reason we very much want to make sure voters are aware of it.
Well, let me ask you this. If they want to get us all out of fossil fuel driven vehicles, gasoline powered trucks and cars, are they also purporting to build all these new electric generation stations that are going to create the electricity that even some of the most ardent, I think even Elon Musk said there's just not even close to the number of electric generation facilities to generate for every American's electric car. If all of a sudden tomorrow we all woke up with Leafs, Volts, and Teslas.
But for the most part, this is not based on anything that's reality. They're not thinking about the long-term impact. If you look at California this summer, they were begging people not to charge their electric cars during the peak time of the day because the electric cars were in danger of crashing their grid on hot days when everybody's running their air conditioning. So that's your future. The future is going to be, well, yeah, you can charge your car at somewhere between 2:30 and 4:15 in the morning. They'll let you charge your car, and of course, they are not planning to build the generation necessary. And the generation they want to build is solar and wind and battery, which will not be reliable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there'll be days when it's great, there'll be days when it's cheap, but then you'll end up with Texas, like you saw in the winter, and it all goes down at the same time, and suddenly you've got a blackout. So, again, if they were serious about this, they'd be talking about building nuclear plants. They'd be talking about using natural gas. They're not serious about this. They haven't planned this out.
Well, it seems more than, as sadly typical, it's just politicking. It is just to be seen on the right side of an issue that's going to generate campaign cash. Do you expect this to be a campaign issue? Because sometimes these campaigns, they want to go for the low-hanging fruit, and they don't pick on something that could be, difficult to nuance.
I think in some parts of the state, it definitely will be a campaign issue. I'm not sure about everywhere. You're right. I mean, I think it doesn't have the emotional punch that some of the other issues have. I mean, this General Assembly, in all honesty, the last 2 years has made so many changes, has gone so far to the progressive and left-wing side on so many issues that it's a target-rich environment. You can talk about lawsuits, you can talk about the economy, you can talk about crime issues, and the crime issues have an awful lot of punch. I think they've really gone too far on those. But again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure people are aware that the next General Assembly they elect will probably have to vote on this, and vote it up or down. And if you want it voted down, you need to be doing something about it right now.
Is it fair to bring into the conversation about this, Stephen, that one of the candidates for governor at one point was heavily subsidized by the Mississippi government to build a factory that was supposedly going to build electric cars for green tech. And should he recuse himself? Should he be pressed on where he stands on this if he were to?
Well, he should definitely be pressed on where he stands. I mean, again, I don't know the details of whether that was good technology or a good design. Clearly, the major companies, Ford and GM and Toyota, they're all building electric vehicles, and I'm sure they're wonderful vehicles. And heaven knows the test cars are amazing. But they have their downsides, and the biggest downside is they're incredibly expensive. And they still haven't really figured out what to do with the batteries once the batteries wear out. But I think I don't want to say there's anything wrong with building electric cars, because there's not. And frankly, I might buy one day. But at the same time, I think he needs to be asked about this particular issue specifically. And it really kind of started under him because he didn't do TCI, but he did the sister tax, also a new tax on your electric bill. It's called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's the same concept. The power company has to pay a fee to use any kind of carbon fuel, and that fee gets passed along as a tax on your bill, especially for Dominion. Dominion is the big company involved in that. So, that was his. He did that. He started that in Virginia. He thinks it's wonderful. So he should think this is wonderful too. He needs to be pressed on that.
And he needs to be put on the record on it. Good old Reggie. It's always a fun day when we get to talk about Reggie there. So
any day now. I mean, the State Corporation Commission within days will announce how much your tax is going to be. It has not been announced yet, but they're right at the end of that case.
Yeah, it is. And again, this goes after, it can't be said enough, this is an impact, as they all are, on the poorest. And it's sadly the party that claims to be the advocate for the poor who are the ones pushing all these items that are going to make more people more poor, because even what remains is the middle class. But again,
you forget, there's going to be yet another tax on your electric bill. This one will be to pay the power bills for those poor people. They're setting up a new income transfer welfare program inside the power company to begin with, so that you will pay another couple of bucks a month on your electric bill to build up this fund so that they don't get hit with the full price. They will suddenly have a subsidized price for electricity. If your income is below 150%, 150% of federal poverty, you will be able to apply for this special rate. So again, they thought that they, to their credit, they know what they're doing is going to cause electric bills to go through the roof, and they're trying to subsidize it at least for the poorest folks.
Yeah, come up at least with the plausible deniability, but it also tips their hand that they know.
They know, and they know the middle class is going to be paying the most. If they want to double my electric bill, I'm a nice, fortunate guy. I've had a nice career. I'm in pretty good shape. They can double my electric bill. They won't kill me. But there's a lot of folks out there, you double their electric bill, they'll notice. It'll hurt. It'll bite.
Well, and it could have a ripple effect through the housing market when you folks like myself who just bought a house. If you double my electric bill, all of a sudden now I'm underwater and I can't afford it, and now you're going to see what happened in 07, 08 again.
Right.
And that's...
I think so. Yes.
So
elections have consequences.
Well, and I think this has to be brought up in this one because it's one of those quiet little ones. And yet President Trump was lampooned for his Million Tree Initiative. I remember reading an article that said, "What does he think that's going to do for the climate and for the carbon in the air?" I'm like, you do realize that's what the trees eat.
Yes. Well, and the environmentalists make the same promises. I think they were just mad because it was him, not because it was a bad idea.
Right. How dare he? Well, and the Republicans are guilty of that in a lot of cases, too. It's like, oh, we were all for that, but why is it him? Why did we could have been Ted Cruz doing that? Stephen, so do you hold out hope, as you write for Bacon's Rebellion, as you do your research into this? Do you hold out hope, even if we're tightly, fixed? Certainly the Senate isn't going to change this year in its construct, but we might have an opportunity with a tie-breaking lieutenant governor if it gets to that point where some senator like a Chap Peterson says, "Yeah, I really don't want to do this to my constituents," and then the governor, even if it isn't the Republican, then is forced to not get his way.
Well, again, I think you have a House election, as you noted. Virtually every district has a choice. In some cases, stronger candidates than others, but everybody's got a choice. The Republicans are running in more districts than they've run in my lifetime. I can't remember them running in 98, 99 districts. So I think that's phenomenal. And win, lose, or draw, I think the competition and I think the choices are important. The Senate is a different animal and has been, as you know, for the last couple of sessions. I mean, the Democratic majority is very thin, and it includes folks like Peterson and a few others who are hardly anti-business and think very hard about the impact on middle-class families. So I think a General Assembly, if the House's attitude changes, if the leadership at the top changes, I think the Senate will be very easy to work with.
So to finish this up, to wrap a bow around this, we should know them by their actions, Stephen. The governor won't talk about it. They've already written in, subsidization for the lower class and probably the lower middle class families as well. Yeah,
I think this is an election more than any other where people need to be finding out what their candidates believe in, pinning them down with questions, doing the research. There's so much information out there, but there's sometimes a real shortage of facts. Sometimes it's just a whole lot of words. But most of these folks are pretty good about campaigning at a retail level. They'll come to your door. They'll come to your community association. Pin them down. Ask them directly.
Yeah. Well, it's the perfect advice, and that's what these candidates need to do on both sides. Stephen Haner, thanks again. It's at the Thomas Jefferson Institute.org, as well as on Bacon's Rebellion. You read his stuff there. Thank you again for joining us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Thank you very much, and call me anytime.
Todd Gackey, Director of Government Relations for the Family Foundation, is back on the program with us. We're going to talk more about what they've discovered regarding the development of some of the justice education programs and the new educational think tank called the Southern Poverty Law Center, next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.